Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Hokyoji Sunday Dharma Talk. It's my pleasure today to introduce Reverend Onryu Kennedy. She's received a Dharma transmission in both the Katagiri and Uchiyama lineages. She's done practice periods at Toshoji International Zen Center and also Tassajara, and completed her Shuso training at Toshoji. And also did zuise, a formal Dharma transmission event in January of 2023. And she is one of the registered teachers in the Japanese Sotochu school. Throughout her life, she's valued social justice work as an expression of her vow. She's currently an associate teacher at Hokyoji Zen Practice Community. She experiences great joy in the opportunity to learn and teach Buddhist practices. So thank you for joining us today, Onryu, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Dokai, for that introduction. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the opportunity to share my practice with each of you and what I've been focusing on recently. So I'd like to say good morning first to all of you. It's great to see you. And I want to send out a special thank you too, though I've mentioned people, but I'd like to just acknowledge again Dokai, Kyoku, Hartman, Dozen, Bo, the board, and all the practitioners who have cared for the land and the place of Hokyoji. That care has really bloomed in a very beautiful way, and may that blooming continue forward for all beings. I'd like to offer homage to the Dakota and Anishinaabe nations whose care of the land have benefited me and all beings. And I would like to also offer and acknowledge my ancestors, all ancestors, Buddhas, matriarchs, patriarchs, and my familial ancestors as well, whose shoulders I stand on, and the teachers and family and friends who have supported me through this whole process as well. So I just want to acknowledge everyone who has helped me throughout space and time to be in this moment with each of you. That has gravity for me. The name of this talk, I thought about it. And I'd like the title to be Great Mind. In Japanese, that would be Daishin. And going beyond big sky, going beyond sky mind into deep space. And I'll talk more about that later. For the past 8 weeks, there's been about anywhere between 12 and 13 of us, and some of those great practitioners are participating in this conversation this morning. So I don't want to call you out, but maybe during the discussion, I just invite you, if you would, bring your voices into the conversation. And everybody, please bring your voices in. We've been studying the Tenzo Kyoken, which is, depending on the translation, it could be refining your life. It's the Tenzo Kyoken is the standards, the guidelines that Dogen Zenji established for the cooks, and actually includes our life, engaging our practice in our lived experience. And how does that work? This fascicle was written in 1237 after Dogen came back from Japan. He left for Japan in 1223. I just give kind of a brief overview. I'm not a Dogen scholar, and I have read a lot of Dogen, and I appreciate Dogen's articulation of Zen practice, especially the Tenzo Kyoken. His view includes cooking for the community and also includes cooking our life force in what the arising conditions are in our lived experience. And we just finished the last class on April 23rd, which was just last Tuesday. And part of the class, also the last class, included people's reflections and how they would like to carry the process forward. So there is a lot of energy, I would say, in bringing other Dogen fascicles forward in the fall, which I think is awesome. The study group too emerged out of a proposal that I offered to Dokai and to Hokyoji. And this proposal moved into a conversation. The conversation that I'm aware of is a conversation that I had with Jushin and Aaron. And then from this conversation, the process bloomed into a study group. And I think it's important that I acknowledge that this study group just didn't come out of thin air. It came out of a vision. And from that vision, it was supported and interconnected and interfaced with people and with Hokyoji. And that to me is powerful because sometimes, I don't know how it is for you, but I've had a lot of ideas. And some of those ideas have bloomed, and some of them have just sat on the fertile ground as seeds. So to have an idea, to have a seed of an idea and to see it bloom is quite beautiful. And sometimes I feel that the same is happening with Hokyoji, and has happened. Katagiri Roshi had an idea, a vision, and that vision is blooming, and may that bloom continue and change. So I just share that because it's an experience that happens to all of us in real time. And sometimes I feel that for me, it's difficult to really see the seeds blooming and the garden growing. Yeah. So together, this Jushin, Aaron, Dokai, Hokyoji, the study group was able to bloom, and it was quite beautiful. Because I feel that people articulated many times the connection that they felt within this virtual community that was developed in Zoom, focused on the Tenzo Kyokin. So I just want to offer that is to bring people into kind of just to get a taste of the experience that we had together. So the book we used was Nothing is Hidden. And this morning, what I'd like to do is read a section, a paragraph, because in that paragraph, I think are many essential practice processes, including a koan from the Book of Serenity that I'd like to talk about this morning. Okay. So this is page 24 in Nothing is Hidden. When ordinarily preparing ingredients, do not regard them with ordinary deluded eyes, or think of them with ordinary emotions. Lifting a single blade of grass builds a Buddha land. Entering a single mote of dust turns the great wheel of the Dharma. Even when, for example, one makes a soup of the crudest greens, one should not give rise to a mind that loathes it or takes it lightly, or even when one makes a soup of the finest cream. One should not give rise to a mind that feels glad and rejoices in it. If one is at the outset free from preferences, how could one have any aversions? Even when confronted with poor ingredients, there is no negligence whatsoever. Even when faced with scanty ingredients, one exerts oneself. Do not change your mind in accordance with things. Whoever changes their mind in accordance with things or revises their words to suit the person is not a person of the way. And one of the things that we did in the study group was encouraged each other to really think about what was being read during that time, and then to offer thoughts, reflections of what was coming forward. So I just invite you, it's an invitation to really, how does that impact you? And what does that bring forward in you? And if you would share that, that'd be awesome. So Dogen writes, lifting a single blade of grass builds a Buddha land. That comes out of the Book of Serenity, case for the world honored one points to the ground. And the thing about the Tenzo Kyogen is it's filled, Dogen has filled it with koans, with stories, with poems. So it's like this history almost of Zen and what all that Zen has encompassed. So there's many teachings in the Tenzo Kyogen, which makes it really rich. So this case, I'll read the case and then I'll go through it. As the world honored one was pointing with the congregation, he pointed to the ground with his finger and said, "This spot is good to build a sanctuary." Indra, emperor of the gods, took a blade of grass, stuck it in the ground, and said, "The sanctuary is built." The world honored one smiled. And many of you may know that poem already and have thoughts about it. So please bring that forward. So in the first sentence, as the world honored one was walking with the congregation, he pointed to the ground with his finger and said, "This spot is good to build a sanctuary." What I hear when the Buddha says, "This spot is good to build a sanctuary," I hear this earth is a good place to build a temple or any kind of Dharma building to teach the Dharma. Indra, the emperor of the gods, took a blade of grass, stuck it in the ground, and said, "The sanctuary is built." This blade of grass, to me, symbolizes many things. Grass on the surface is ordinary. And in many places, it is everywhere. When I walk the river at this time during spring, there's green grass everywhere. Also, this blade of grass is not separate from me. It represents the 5 skandhas: form, feeling, sensation, mental formations, and consciousness. We use our 5 skandhas to express the boundlessness of Buddha's teaching. This grass reminds me of sometimes when I read this, I was thinking, this grass is the center of everything. The center is everywhere, and the circumference is nowhere. It cannot be measured. It's boundless and it's inconceivable to the mind. And the last sentence to me is just wonderful. The world honored one smiled. For me, that smile is an acknowledgement. It's a transmission from Buddha to Indra, from the grass to the earth. And the Buddha, from my view, was acknowledging that, yes, the temple is everywhere. It's everywhere we walk. It's in the blade of grass. It's in the stones. It's in the grasses, trees, and walls, as Dogen would say. It's boundless. And I would also like to share too the introduction. And in the introduction, I also was studying a talk by Shohaku Roshi. So I got some of the understanding of this introduction from him because it was a little more nuanced for me. And in the introduction, it says, as soon as a single mote of dust arises, the whole earth is contained therein. With a single horse and a single lance, the lands extended. Who is this person who can be master in any place and meet the source everywhere? That's pretty awesome too. But what does it mean when it's broken down? As soon as a single mote of dust arises, what Okamura Roshi said and how I imagine this is that as soon as a mote of dust arises, the universe comes into existence. And this is innumerable universes. The whole earth is contained therein. Whatever is arising contains everything everywhere. The center, the center is everywhere, and the circumference is nowhere. With a single horse and a single lance, the land is extended. What Roshi was saying is that historically in China, there'd be wars, and the motivation for the wars, of course, is to extend the land. And I would say that that was not only happening in China, it happens throughout the world. It happened here in the US. And the pivot is that a single horse represents one person's actions. A single horse and a single lance. And the land is extended. When we do things to help ourselves and to help all beings, our capacity is expanded. The potential for goodness is expanded and possible. Who is this person who can be master in any place and meet the source in everything? Who is this person? This person is you. This person is me. This person is a blade of grass. If a Tenzo can grow this attitude, if I can grow this attitude of serving myself and serving all beings without preference, I have the possibility of being a good host, of being a good guest, of going beyond my egocentricity, and using my 5 skandhas in relationship to my vow. How beautiful is that? And also, it's not a big deal most of the time. Most of the time, It's like when I walk on along the river, it's like smiling at people or saying hi and then having them respond back with that kindness. Or it can be as large as taking care of a Zen center like Hokyoji and inviting all beings to support the care of a Zen temple, or just taking care of oneself as a blade of grass and having the magnanimous mind of caring for grass like one would care for soup or cream or strawberries or a child. And I think one of the things too that came forward for me is that there's many times when I was Tenzo, I thought, man, I really don't want to be in the kitchen. I want to be in the Zendo. I want to be sitting. And so there was this preference of sitting is more important than cooking for the Buddhas who are sitting in the Zendo. And that was a reflection for me that I really wanted to pivot, that how do I create a mind that holds at that time it was the cooking equally with the sitting. And in studying the Tenzo Kyoken this time, my understanding of this fascicle was deepened. And for me, what was uncovered was the connection of Dogen's fascicle of self-fulfillment samadhi, Jiju Yu Zamai, and the Tenzo Kyoken. Dogen writes in the self-fulfilling samadhi, he writes, therefore, if only one person sits for a short time, because this zazen is one with all existence and completely permeates all time, it performs everlasting Buddha guidance within the inexhaustible Dharma world in the past, present, and future. Zazen is equally the same practice and the same enlightenment for both the person sitting and all dharmas. There's no difference between crude greens and cream and me sitting in the Zendo. It's all dynamically functioning together. He ends with, you should know that even if all the Buddhas in the 10 directions, as numerous as the sands of the Ganges River, together engage the full power of their Buddha wisdom, they could never reach the limit or measure or comprehend the virtue of one's person's zazen. And I think that to me is an important insight that I have been developing through the years of my practice, is that there's no way to measure the zazen that I'm doing. There's no real way to measure what I'm offering to people through cooking. And if I'm doing that, I'm doing that from my egocentricity, a need that I have to be doing it right, to be doing it perfectly. Just to be doing it is not enough. So what I hear Dogen really reinforcing is that it's incomprehensible. There's no way to do it. There's no way to measure it. And really, that's freeing because it's inconceivable to the mind. I've got about 10 minutes left. Earlier this week, I participated in an evening at Sanshin. They offered a virtual conversation with Tom Wright, Arthur Braverman, and Michael Hoffman to honor Uchiyama Roshi. And one of the things that Tom Wright said is he shared a story about Uchiyama Roshi when Uchiyama Roshi was 81. And Uchiyama Roshi said, "I'm just beginning to understand Buddha Dharma." And someone asked the question, what does that mean? At 81, Uchiyama Roshi is saying, I'm only just now beginning to understand Buddha Dharma. And Tom Wright explained, Uchiyama Roshi was speaking to the depth of our practice. Our practice is going deep, and it goes deeper and deeper. Our insights are endless and have no bottom. There are no levels, and as Dogen Zenji states, this practice is without limits and cannot be measured. And I was struck too when Tom Wright added, our practice flows into our lived experience as compassion. To me, that's very significant because it's not just about sitting in the zendo or sitting on the cushion in my den or sitting in a chair right now. It's about what is my capacity to go into my lived experience with kindness for myself and for all beings. That to me is awakening to myself in relationship to those around me, to the things around me. And I think that this practice of cooking in Zazen, it's a great practice and it's not separate and it's interpenetrating all the time. And I think going back to Dogen's self-fulfillment samadhi, for me, this is shunyata in real time. This is an openness to the fullness of life and burning one's life force, the universe in total dynamic functioning of what Dogen Zenji calls Zenki. And this is what is happening all the time and is flowing through us ceaselessly. Yeah, and sometimes it's like, I wish I would act in relationship that we are all connected, whether we are present to this or not. I am always connected. to the life force, to this total dynamic functioning, whether I'm aware or not. If I'm in a grocery store or in my home, wherever I am, I'm in relationship to those around me. Maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's neighbors, a friend, or a pet. This relationship is always there and extends into the environment in which we live, the trees, the birds. And I feel that this relationship and this vast interconnection is what is often called oneness. I call it right now, after listening to Tom Wright, I call it compassion. And I believe that the less of me there is in relationship to the world in which I live, the more there is of the world that I live in me. So it's vast and it's deep. And recently I was in another life, if I could have been an astronaut, I would have been an astronaut. But instead, I do other things. I was recently I was watching a film about Apollo 8, and they were interviewing the astronauts. And they were talking about their experience of seeing the Earth rise as they were coming around the moon. And their expression and the view, the extraordinary view of the Earth surrounded by this deep space, for me was mind-blowing. I was like, to have that view, right? I think it was Frank Borman was talking about, many of us, we just see the blue sky and the horizon. But to see deep space and to see the Earth within this deep space it's unexplainable. And I was like, we often talk about sky mind. The Tibetans talk about sky mind a lot. And we were talking about it somewhat in Tenzo Kyoken too, having a sky mind, having more space, having a bigger view. And I was like, what would it be like to have a view of this deep space? And it wasn't just the Earth that was there. And the astronauts were saying that you could not see boundaries. You could make out some of the continents and where they were, but you couldn't make out the boundaries of the Earth. And yet that's where their home was. That's where their family was. That's where people they loved were. And I was like, and not only was it the Earth, but it was the planets. I couldn't see the planets, but the planets were there too. The Milky Way was there too. This galaxy was there. But then there were other galaxies that were existing within this deep space. I just offer that as a possibility. What would that be like to live with a mind that is always curious and knows we can always go deeper. There is no arrival in this practice. The depth is beyond our imagination. And I find freedom in that. I'd like to end with a poem in the Tenzo Kyoken. I must say I like it. It's quite beautiful. Dogen writes, 1 character, 3 characters, 5 characters, and 7 characters. These are the myriad dharmas. Having thoroughly investigated the 10,000 things, none have any foundation. There's nowhere to land. At midnight, the white moon sets into the dark ocean. When searching for the black dragon's pearl, you will find they are numerous. Thank you. Thank you for your presence and thank you for your attention. And please bring your voices into the conversation.
Well, thank you. Thank you, GD. Tenzo Kyoken's always been one of my favorite things to read, and I'm particularly fond of the passage of do not look at ordinary greens, with a disdaining mind, and don't look at, cheesecake with joy. So that's a challenging thing. But it does remind me when I was cooking oatmeal for the community many times, and I was working very hard to get my oatmeal just perfect. And I thought I'd reached there with just the right amount of raisins, the right amount of butter, the right amount of maple syrup, cinnamon, salt, the whole business. And I served it to the community here at Hokyoji, and in those days, the cook ate later after the community, and one person coming down the path. She was born in France, and she kind of she let her thoughts just kind of flow out uneditedly, and she said, "Oh, your oatmeal's too sweet." And so I thought, wow, okay. I thought I'd reached perfection on it, but apparently not. The other thing that comes to my mind is trying to learn how to cook rice gruel in Japan. I don't know if you've had this experience, but they're very particular about having no lumps in this very soupy kind of rice. And I thought I had it down perfectly, but one of the monks supervising me said, he found a lump like the size of a pea, and he says, "Dame, dame." Dame means no good, no good. You can't imagine how many times I heard that word say to me when I was in Japan. But thank you for bringing this talk alive. And the Tenzu Kyokan does have that big mind and very focused on this concrete world that we live on mind, how they merge together. So thank you for your talk.
what Dokai brings up is interesting because the Tenzo is expected to have this non-discriminatory, non-preference, but the consumers express their preferences without hesitation, it seems. So oatmeal, especially, I've been criticized on my oatmeal, and they wouldn't criticize me directly, but they said the Tenzo would know, a Tenzo would know to put more, because oatmeal, if it just sits for a while, it tends to thicken up. And then if it's thicken up, it's harder to serve. And my oatmeal was thickening up and it was perfect when I left the stove, but as it sat there, it thickened up. And I was told a Tenzo would know to add water to thin it up. And it's like, they wouldn't criticize me directly, but they would say a Tenzo would know. So this it's like, okay, I can live with that.
The person who was criticizing me was not so kind to make any kind of indirect comment. Just told me directly, Dokai, your oatmeal's too sweet. Anyway, and speaking of no preferences, I did have a preference. I thought my oatmeal, I had reached perfection. So, anyway, it's always something to find out more about.
At Open Arms, the chefs for Open Arms have all moved to the facility in St. Paul, and they were very, very good at cooking brown rice in deep hotel pans, and they have these fancy ovens which use steam, and the rice was absolutely beautiful. And now we're dealing in the Minneapolis facility with Meals on Wheels chefs, and they do just not a good job with rice. And it's like it has to be chopped up with a bench scraper for people to be able to dish it out. But that's just the way it is. But it's like if I go in on Wednesday and I work with a guy who's gone to culinary school, he spends the whole time complaining about the difference. And it's like, I don't want to go in on Wednesday and hear someone complain the whole time. I would rather go in on my normal days and just, yep, that's just the way it is. It's the open arm chefs are better, discriminatory at cooking rice, brown rice especially. But you don't need to hear about it to be of service. It's like it's diminishing the experience in a lot of serious ways. So I don't know. I just threw that out there.
I'll come clean. I was one of the people who attended the study group, and I just want to say it was so fun. I mean, it was just really just the chance to read a text together with other people and to hear what struck them, and for me to be able to express what struck me, and it was just felt very open-hearted, and just really, really appreciated the chance to do it. So thank you, and thank Hokyoji for making it possible. And that's all I got. Just so it was a nice group. Thank you. Being discriminatory, I guess. Enjoyed it.
Hi, GD. I wonder if thank you for the talk, first of all, and I wonder if you could say a little something about the moving towards balance from Zazen in the kitchen and Zazen in the Zendo. And a little bit of background on the question from my perspective is that I get very tight, very constricted feeling in the Zendo after work or in the kitchen after working all day. And I feel like I need time in the Zendo at the end of the day. So I wonder if maybe you could share a little bit about, yeah, just that move in your practice.
I really appreciate that question, Dozen. And I want to say it's been an evolution for me. When I was Tenzo, I was a child protection worker at Hennepin County. So I would do my job, which was quite intense, I gotta say. I'll acknowledge that. And then I would go to the community and cook. And I was so tight. I mean, I thought my head was going to explode. I'm just going to be transparent. And what I discovered for me at that time was I could not do this alone. I could not be responsible for setting the meals, getting groceries, cooking the meals, and making sure they were all out there on time. I couldn't do it. So what I talked to, at that time it was Biakran, and I said, we got to do something different because this isn't working, because all my triggers are going off and I am serving nobody. I'm not serving myself. I'm not serving the community. And what we developed was a Tenzo Ryo. And it was the Tenzo Ryo that really buoyed me up so I could do this practice for a year and do it in a way where I could kind of settle a little bit and not be so triggered and not be so tight. Because what happens too, and we know this, is that our life force goes into what we're doing. So if I'm cooking, that tightness is being transmitted into my cooking and into what I am creating. So with the Tenzo Ryo, it helped to divide up the many tasks of the Tenzo. And it's that tightness for me, it was good in that I could identify, like, whoa, I am so contracted. I have nothing to offer except doing the details. So in that regard, it was information. But what to do with that information? How to create some space for myself, right? And that's part of the practice of interconnectedness, is that the Tenzo cannot do this practice alone. The conditions that we are dealing with in our time are different than the conditions that Dogen was dealing with during his time. So to be fluid and to be flexible, yeah, does that help at all?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
I think, it's really important if we are kind of wired, and I'm not saying you're wired this way, but if we're kind of wired to be independent and to do it on our own, that's a process that we need to really unwire ourselves. And that's what I had to do for me, is to really unwire that in my nervous system and to open it up so that other people could come into this space. Yeah. So keep going.
There's another passage from the Tenzo Kyoken that I really like too. It's when Dogen met the old man who was coming to the town to get some mushrooms to create a fine soup for the community because of some special occasion. Dogen, he was young, 20 years old, something like that. And he asked the old man, 68 years old, he said, "Why do you spend your time being a Tenzo when you could be sitting in the Zendo doing Zazen?" And the Tenzo, I don't know if it was at that time, but later I think he re-met that person, but the point that the old Tenzo made was that old man Tenzo was, "My young man, you understand nothing about cooking, let alone the Dharma," something like that. So anyway, let's just say that Dogen probably was not in a different place than you are, Dozen. So it's like he probably didn't like to spend a lot of time in the kitchen and thought that being on the cushion was the better place to be. And being that Tenzo was old Tenzo was 68 and I'm now 73, I don't care too much whether I'm in the kitchen or in the Zendo anymore. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's just the way it is. So, however, I do limit my Tenzo to once a year, one time a year. But so it's not an easy practice. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think I appreciate both. I think I appreciate the Zendo maybe a little more, but it's also like I feel like I need Zazen at the end of the day. I don't know. It's there I still feel that there is some difference there. There's some other calming aspect to sitting Zazen versus Zazen in movement in the kitchen.
Well, I can appreciate that a lot, Dozen, and that's one big difference between you and me, is that after a full day of cooking for me, I do not want to go to the Zendo. I want to go plop down in my bed and go to sleep. So just a minor difference going on. But anyway, but I appreciate your practice of feeling like you need to go to the Zendo after a hard day of cooking. So that's good practice.
Yeah, I kind of get that too, as far as like that's not necessarily just with tenzoing. Sometimes after a day that's had a lot of charge to it or it's been really active, just to go and just sit and invite the mind to settles the nervous system. So though I know that in Zazen, the intention is not to get anywhere, it's to just shikantaza, just sit. I get that. And sometimes it does have an effect for me. I do want to acknowledge it does settle my nervous system. So I can appreciate that.
Well, thank you, GD. We've come to the end of our time, and so I'm going to make a couple of announcements. Next week, I will be talking, and then you'll have to check the website for people after me. So, and then different events coming up. Well, we have something going on every weekend for May. Minnesota Contemplative Outreach retreat is beginning next Friday. It goes for about 5 days, I believe. I think it's a Christian-based prayer, and it says a centering prayer retreat. And I did notice on the Thursday before that retreat begins on my calendar, it says the National Day of Prayer. So anyway, I didn't know we had such a day, but I guess there is. May 9, a retreat begins called Naturally Awake. That's led by Raisei Mark Anderson, who spoke just recently. And May 16th, the True Heart Women's Retreat will begin, and that's led by GD, who's here right in front of us, and also Kyoku. And also starting May 26th, there's a just sitting retreat. So if you want to come and just sit, that's a fine retreat to do. Very limited services and formal Zen ritual. And as I understand it, there's only 2 rules. Number 1, you have to be silent. And number 2, you can't not tell anybody that they did something wrong, or you'll be expelled. So you can keep that in mind. So anyway, that's the announcements, and we'll close with the 4 vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.